So hello, my name is Martyn Richards from Agriton, UK, and today we're going to be talking about Bokashi. Now, in the UK, we have a big issue with food waste, and unfortunately, most of our food that we actually consume, the output, the other side, doesn't really reflect what we want to achieve for the environment. So most of your food waste goes into landfill, and hopefully in the next couple of years, the government will realise that actually we need to do something about it. And I want to tell you about a system that has been designed by a guy called Dr. Higa in Japan called Bokashi. Now, Bokashi itself is turning your food waste into gold. So one thing I want to emphasize is that we don't really think about how much food we actually waste. So first things first, if you think about food waste in your own home, think about how much food you actually consume and how much you actually waste. Now, normally, if you think about your Sunday roast, you would peel your carrots, you'd peel your potato skins, you'd then cook your food, and then after that food is cooked and you've consumed what you like, then you have leftovers. Now, some of those leftovers are very simple. They can be then meal prepped into other meals, but you do have a lot of paper plate scrape bins. Now, those plate scrape bins normally go into some kind of container, and then the council then pick it up. But there are areas where that food waste just goes directly into a big bin, and then it's an out of sight, out of mind. So today I want to talk to you about that food waste and think about what we can do to help the environment, but also help our pockets. One thing we forget sometimes with food waste is that actually food waste costs money. So actually the waste that we create in our own homes has valuable resources, not just for the soil, but also for your pocket as well. So next time you look at your food and you're placing up your food, think about how much that portion size is, but also think about the waste that you're going to waste the other side. So the best thing to do when it comes to food waste is when you're portioning up, think about how much you're going to eat. And if you want a bigger portion, just have another portion instead of piling your plate up. Now, by the end of today, you'll understand Bokashi and what Bokashi is, but also how you can utilize this in your schools or in your home environments. So let's talk about composting first. And if you think about composting as a system, my experience of composting goes back to my granddad. And my granddad used to have a big compost pile at the bottom of his allotment, and it would be steaming away. And he would put near enough everything into that composting system. So most of it was green waste. So things like grass clippings, and it was a bit of fruit and veg where it's been cut off and then put into a big pile. And I remember being a child thinking about that as a system and thinking, I wonder what's happening in that system. And one thing that you'll always have with these kind of systems is that you have a lot of heat normally and a lot of steam happening. Now, those leftovers that are in that system are leftovers not just from your own systems, but also from the environment as well. So we can't stop plants growing, so we need to then prune them and then put them into a system. But think about what composting is to you. Does your school compost anything? And do you compost at home? Now, Bokashi is slightly different to composting. So normally with compost, you would have heat, and then you would have water, and you would have some greens, so things like grass and clippings, and you would have some kind of brown, so leaves or twigs, etc. And then if you had food waste, that would normally go in with the rest of the system. And then over a period of time, you would turn it. You would then use a system called decomposition. And that then takes normally about 3 to 4 months for that process to happen. And you have to physically move it. Now, Bokashi is not like that. So the first thing when we talk about Bokashi is using a bin. So we use a food collection bin to be able to do this process. So the big one that most people have a problem with when it comes to food waste is smell. So think about food waste in your own home environment. If you put a chicken carcass in the sun or into a container for more than a week, and then you then open that lid in that container, you would get maggots and you would get a really smelly bin. Now, Bokashi uses a closed system, i.e., there's no air going to it, and it uses microbes to be able to process it. So the big thing with Bokashi is you don't get as much smell. Now, the smell that you get from a Bokashi bin, if you've got one in your classroom or you've got one at home, is the sweet kind of soury smell. Now, for Bokashi to work, there are some things you'll need. So first things first, you'll need a Bokashi bin. So the Bokashi bins can either be made by DIY, so you can put a bin inside a bin, and your teacher would have some resources available to show you how to make your own Bokashi bins. Or you could buy one off a shelf, which is a Bokashi bin that is pre-made for you. Now, the most important part of this process is the Bokashi bran. The Bokashi bran does all the work for us. So when we put our food waste into our bin, we need those microbes to be able to do the work for us. So it's like having composting, but inside. So this can be done inside or outside, but you do need to have a sealed container for it to work. So the big one is, what can you put into a Bokashi bin? Now, the great thing with Bokashi is you can actually put everything into your Bokashi bin. So if you've looked at composting before, normally with composting, you would use vegetables. You wouldn't put much meat or fish or dairy into those processes because it's hard for the microbes normally to be able to break down that organic matter. So you can put everything. Now, think about your Sunday roast. You can put your peelings in from how you prepared the Sunday roast. And then at the end of the process, if you have a chicken carcass, that can also go into that process. All the plate scrapings and anything meat, fish, dairy, all can go into this process. But it's really important to think about what's happening in that process. So if you left it in that container with no microbes in it, the good bacteria that do all the work, you would then get a smell. So we need to make sure that we put that Bokashi bran into that system as well. So the science behind Bokashi is very similar to milk and yogurt. So if you think about milk and yogurt are the same product, but yogurt is gone through a bacterial process. So my question to everyone is, think about how many calories are in milk and how many calories are in yogurt. So if we took 100 ml of milk and 100 ml of yogurt, you would actually get more calories in yogurt than you would in milk. Now, the product is exactly the same. It starts from milk and it goes through a fermentation process. The process of Bokashi is exactly the same. So all we're taking is our organic matter, we're making it into a fermentation process to preserve. Now, think about your pickled onions that you buy from the shop, or pickled onions you've made yourself. A pickled onion will still look like a pickled onion in 1, 3, or even 5 years' time. But then when you take that pickled onion out of your container and put it into your hand, if you then try and squish it, you'll notice that the onion will squish a lot easier the older it gets. Now, this system, fermentation, is nothing new. So fermentation has been around for years and years, and it was designed really to preserve and retain the nutrients in that process. But we need bacteria to do that. Now, the bacteria that we normally talk about in our home environments and in schools are bad bacteria. So if you think about your spray that you use to clean your work surfaces, you are using a thing called an antibacterial process. Now, just to make you aware, even on my hand now is bacteria. Now, if I put that in my mouth, I know that I've cleaned my hands and I'm safe to be able to do that. And we live in a world now where we feel that we need to kill bacteria all the time. Actually, bacteria can be good as well as bad. So if you think about when you're looking at a surface or you're touching something, think about the process and what's happening. We would never say to you, put your hand in your mouth if you've been in a dirty environment. So maybe you're picking up a chicken breast and you're then cooking with that, because bad bacteria will dominate a lot more in these situations. But if we're talking about fermentation, we're talking about the good bacteria that's going to do the process. And the bacteria that we use are lactic acid bacteria, phototrophic bacteria, and yeast. They are a strain of bacteria that do all the decomposition for us and make our pickling process work. Now, the key thing is that after we've pickled our food waste, we want to do something with it. So the Bokashi bins themselves are a sealed unit, and they are what we call anaerobic. So anaerobic means with no oxygen. You may have heard of a term called aerobic, which is with oxygen. So anaerobic means no oxygen. And what we've done with our Bokashi bin is we put our food waste on. We then put our Bokashi brand on the top. We've squished it down and we put the lid on. And we've done that every time we wanted to fill it up. And then when it's full, we're going to leave it for 2 weeks to then ferment. Now, after that two-week period, if you open that bin up, all you would see is exactly what you put in. So an onion will look like an onion, a chicken carcass will look like a chicken carcass. So it's not like a standard composting where you're looking at earth or soil in respects to what it looks like. So we need to put it through another process. Now, soil is a very complicated system, but in simple terms, soils need food just like us. So we talk about carbohydrates, proteins, and fats to feed ourselves. The soil also needs those processes. So they would use nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, NPK. Now, that is normally done with photosynthesis, but inside the soil is loads of microbes. So we have loads of bacteria, we have fungi, we have living things in that soil that needs to be fed as well. Now, just an interesting fact, when you eat your food, you don't actually eat. So we chew it and then we then put it into our stomach system. But actually after that, microbes will eat that food waste. Now, it's a weird thing to think about because actually inside our gut, we're not processing that food. The microbes are processing that food. So if you think about it from your own scenario, for us to be able to feed ourselves, we need those microbes. But also the soil needs those microbes as well. So it's really important when we're talking about how to happen to grow things, we don't just talk about the NPK or the carbohydrates, proteins, and fats in soil, but also how the soil is going to actually then process it. And this is where we need bacteria. Now, the great thing with Bokashi is that we've already created a bacterial process in our fermented food waste. So what we now can do is we can now dig a trench, put that food waste directly into the soil and actually feed the soil. Now, the advantages with feeding the soil is that we have the ability then to feed the microbes. If we're feeding the microbes will then help to then feed the plants, which will help with things like plant disease, water retention in soil, and just general soil health. So next time you pick up a handful of soil, have a smell. Think about what's actually happening in that soil structure itself. And actually what you have is billions of microbes that are doing a process to be able to process that into something that the plant can actually use. Now, it's really important to think about food waste and what we do with food waste in the future. We can't keep burying it. There is not enough space in the world to be able to keep burying our waste products. But remember, as humans, we've created this product as waste because we just don't know what to do with it. Now, if you think about a forest floor or a rainforest and no human interaction is happening, if you walked in, it would just be working. As humans, we've taken too much over the years, and now we need to give back to Mother Nature. So just taking our waste product, we can now make it into a resource. And that resource then can feed our souls and then, in theory, feed us then in the future. So it is a win-win situation. Now, I want you to think about starting your own Bokashi bin. Now, obviously, it's really easy to buy one off a shelf, but you can make one yourself. And there will be details in the pack to be able to make your own Bokashi bins at home and in school. But actually, it's a very simple process. You just need a bin, some Bokashi bran, and some food scraps, and then you can start your own system at home. Now, The benefits of Bokashi compared to traditional composting is that we can actually do everything in the Bokashi bin. So all the food waste that we produce, from the preparation all the way through to the plate scrapings, can all be put into the Bokashi process. It doesn't take up much space. They're normally very small containers, sort of 16 liters. But it's not the only process available when it comes to using food waste. So things like vermicomposting, so using worms to be able to process that food, are a really good way of doing it. But also you can use the cashew food waste to help those worms digest it. So worms don't have teeth. They actually use a system of being able to process it through microbes. So they also use microbes in their own guts as well. So if we actually make it more pre-digested for them, then it means that they can have the ability to be able to digest it a lot more efficiently. Think about, when you eat food yourself, actually the less chewing that needs to be involved, the easier it is to then process via the microbes. And this is when I hand over to everyone now listening to this presentation. What will you do? Will you think about the way that you process food? Will you think about the money that's involved in this process? So, I talk about taking a carrot, for example. When I first looked at food generally, I thought I had to peel a carrot, I had to chop the top and bottom off because my mum and my grandparents have always told me that. Now, we live in a society where actually we wash most of our fruit and veg before it even gets to the supermarket. So, do we actually need to scrape all the peelings off to then actually eat it? And actually, as I said to you, microbes are all around us. Every surface that you touch, every vegetable you pick up, all have microbes on it. So actually, those microbes can be good bacteria as well as bad bacteria. So when you peel your carrot, actually those microbes which helped it grow in the first place are on the outside of those carrots. So actually, if you do eat that, it will help with your own microbiome in your gut and obviously help with processes in the future. We just need to take some small steps. We just need to think about how we use our food waste and make it into a resource. But also in the future, when you think about growing your own food, how am I going to feed that soul to then feed me? So think about it as a complete process more than just thinking about waste as a waste resource. There are small changes we can all do in our own environments. And it's really important to think about these small steps as humans to help the environment and ourselves in the future. So as a company, Agriton, all we ask is become a rebel. Think about, utilizing your food waste and your resources more efficiently, but also think about how we can help the environment by feeding that soil. For any other information, if you can get in contact with agriton.co.uk. My name is Martyn, and thank you very much for your time.